Good evening, everyone. I am Molly Moran. I'm the owner of Table Wine in Madison, and I'm so happy to be here tonight with you. Tonight, the class is Break It Down, Earth. So Break It Down is a series of classes that I do from time to time where we do what's called component tasting. And I'll explain that in just a second. So if you ever see a class pop up and it's called Break It Down, it's usually followed by colon and then something more specific. And so tonight is Earth. And this is a really interesting group of wines and a kind of a slightly difficult subject to tackle. So I'm really looking forward to getting into it with you. I was going to say digging into it, and then I stopped myself from the bad pun, and then I went back to it. So there you go. If you are joining us live, welcome. We have a question on the table just to kind of get the chat moving and started, which is what's something that you've read recently and loved. So I would love to see some answers from those of you who are watching live. Dora Lee is reading Transcendent Kingdom, and I can't recommend that book enough. Gyasi is amazing. I think that book is phenomenal. And Katya is reading This Tenderland and also The New Jim Crow. So other folks, you've read an article, you've read something that was interesting. So I'd love to hear what other people have to say. And we do use the chat quite a bit. So if you are here with us tonight, I do really recommend using the chat. It's the best way for us to communicate. And this class, more than some of the other ones that are based more in history or geography or that kind of thing, there's not so much for me to talk about, right? There's more of us tasting and smelling together. So one of the benefits of being here while I'm here too, is to ask your questions. Nothing is too basic a question, nor is something too detailed a question. Like, do it. Jen Savino is reading We All Will Rise. Amazing. I love it. I am reading. Well, here are two things that I've read recently that I've loved. Alexis has read the AmeriCorps Notice of Funding Opportunity that she just released, and she's on a reading hiatus. That's fair. Here are two things that I've read recently that I loved. One, a tweet from Roxane Gay about 10 minutes ago. No, it was probably longer than that. But if you don't know Roxane Gay, she's an amazing author and thought leader and proud member of the LGBTQ community. And she tweeted about, I understand the attraction to Harry Styles. So that brought me lots of joy. That made me super happy. But my other answer is a book that's coming out in October called Revelations in Air by Jude Stewart. And the reason that I bring it up and mention it is that when it is published, it's something that I think I might have a few copies around the shop, or at least we'll talk about it again, probably on social media and stuff. It is a book about smells and about the science of smelling. And Jude goes into different smells. So I picked up the book just out of curiosity. She has a really lovely way of making scientific things super easy to digest. And she wrote a book about color. She wrote a book about patterns. Now she's writing a book about smells. And I picked it up I wasn't thinking about it from a professional standpoint. I just thought it would be kind of interesting. And then I was like, oh, right, this is like kind of what I do for a living. And the whole first chapter is about Earth. And I was like, oh my God, seriously? Like, this is just such perfect timing. So I did kind of lead us down that path with that icebreaker. So thanks for playing along. But there are also other good book suggestions there. So as it's appropriate, I might share some of the stuff that I've learned so far in her book because it's really pretty great. So the point of what we're doing tonight is called component tasting. And what we're going to do is we're going to smell an item and then smell and taste a wine that has either aromas or flavors that mimic that specific thing. So hopefully, if you are drinking along, you are also able to rustle up some dirt and some mushrooms, and you have some matches or have some access to fire in a way that will give us smoke. So that's why I said not a lighter, because that's not really going to do it. That's just going to smell like butane. So we're going to smell the thing. In the case of at least the mushrooms, as long as you're not allergic, you're welcome to taste as well. I did a class a while ago where we were talking about all sorts of different things in our component tasting, and we talked about wet rocks. And that group that evening was brave enough to stick their rocks in their mouth. If you're feeling it, you are welcome to stick your dirt in your mouth if you're that kind of person, but that is not a requirement. I just want to say that now. If you don't have those items, of course you're welcome to join us, but the point of the class is the actual like tie-in with those specific things. So I think you'll get more out of it if you have those things. So why are we doing it? Other than, something to do on a Thursday night. We are doing this because component tasting really helps you improve your palate. It is going to, as we're going through this, it's a very mindful way of smelling and tasting wine. And you are going to create new neural pathways. So that's like super cool. Right? You are going to do something, you're going to change the shape of your brain over the course of the next 50 minutes. Which I think when you say it like that is kind of just awesome and fascinating, right? So what's going to happen is you are going to create a new sense memory with the way that something smells and the way that something tastes, being the dirt and then the wine that smells or tastes like dirt, like wet earth. So you're going to just have this memory. You're going to have this thing that lives in your brain now, and you will be able to recall it. So when you are listening to a server at a restaurant and they're describing two Pinot Noirs to you, and they say, well, one's really super like fruity and one's kind of earthy, has that wet earth kind of thing going on. You can decide for yourself. You can recall that memory and say, oh, I liked that wet earth thing, or, whoa, that was like not my style. I don't like that. Or, somewhere along the spectrum. It might not be a love or hate relationship. It might just be like, that's what I'm in the mood for tonight or not. So this process really does help you just become a stronger, more savvy drinker. It allows you to get the kinds of things that you want. It allows you to understand some more wine vocabulary than perhaps you did before. And quite honestly, it's just fun. It is really fun. There's a reason that I do these classes. People tend to just like get a lot out of it. It's something that seems really simple, ends up being really a meaningful time. So I hope that proves to be true for all of us tonight. And I will say one thing about the wines before we jump in. So with other classes that I teach, if you've not taken a class with me before, I teach virtual classes at least a couple times a month, and they often center on specific grapes or specific places, sometimes more in-depth concepts as well. And I try to, outside of the place classes, right? So let's say a grape class. In a grape class, I try to give people a very wide spectrum of places. I have a sneeze attack coming on, and it's going to happen, and I can just feel it. I knew it. It was there when I was in the green room waiting for the class to start. Thank you all for the kind blessings. Thank you. So I usually, when I'm picking wines for different classes, I try to give people a breadth of places so that you get to kind of have a sense of, Cabernet across the world. You'll notice if you bought the wines from us at Table Wine, you'll notice that one wine is from Italy and the other two are not only from France, but they are both from the Loire Valley. That was not purposeful. That was me trying to find wines that I thought best encapsulated the specific thing I wanted to talk about in tonight's class. So we're not going to go on a whole world tour as we often do. So just a heads up about that. But that's a really good way to get to talk about the fact that these flavors and aromas, these things that fall into this earth bucket, come from a couple different factors. So there are certain grapes that just have these compounds in them in higher concentration. So the compound that scientists think give us these aromas and flavors is called geosmin. They haven't 100% pinpointed it down, but it is the thing in beets that make beets taste like earth, and so that they are pretty sure that that's what's happening in wine. So there are certain red grapes that have those compounds in higher quantity, more noticeable quantity. For instance, Cabernet Franc, which is the last grape that we're going to try tonight, Pinot Noir. Our first wine does not normally, that's not really like what it's known for. So there is like a little group of red grapes that tend to have these aromas and flavors. Also, in conjunction with that, the less ripe a grape is, you're having beet pizza for dinner. What a perfect pairing. That's delicious. The less ripe a grape is, the less sugar it has in it, right? The less fruity it tastes. Therefore, all the other fruit things can come to the surface. So, for instance, Pinot Noir, which is our second wine, that's our Sancerre Rouge that we're going to try. Pinot Noir, if you've had it from, let's say, the Russian River Valley in Sonoma, where it's warmer and grapes can get a little bit riper, will have more fruit flavors to them. Pinot Noir from the cooler place like Sancerre doesn't have all of that kind of fruit. And so it has other things going on. So these aromas and flavors come from both the grape and the place, or it can be in either. So heads up on that. And the only other thing that I want to mention is that while we are tasting 3 reds tonight, there are whites that do have some of these qualities. For instance, I was drinking a Chardonnay earlier today and I said it tasted like creamy mushrooms. You can definitely get smoky, and minerals, the bucket of minerals falls into under the larger umbrella of earth. Minerals are something that I like to tackle separately because it's a big confusing concept. So we're not going to talk about it too much. We are going to talk about smoke in a little bit. But know that just because we are drinking just whites, that doesn't mean there aren't, that we are just drinking reds, that doesn't mean there aren't whites that fall into this. But when we talk about, when wine professionals refer to earthy wines, and they use just like the blanket earthy is almost inherently tied to red wine. And I think to go back to beets, if you can tie it to beet, that's really kind of the best way I think you can think about it. So if there aren't any questions, we're going to dive in. But please, if you have something, please let me know in the chat. Okay, so we're going to start. We're going to start with the big umbrella term. I figured that was kind of the easiest way to get us started. So again, if you are drinking the table wines, pour yourself some of the Cantine Valpene if you haven't already. And if you are drinking something else, whatever you bought as kind of the earthy bucket. Before you smell or taste the wine, let's smell our earth. So one thing that I learned in this book that I think is so great, because I had sent the information out to all of the registered attendees about having some dirt, both wet and dry. And then I was reading in my smell book about water helps people smell better. So things that are wet have more scents to them. So I would recommend, if you haven't already, pouring a little bit of water onto the dirt. I don't need it to be, I don't want you to make mud necessarily in your house, but it will help you kind of smell it a little bit more. If you're comfortable with kind of getting your hands a little dirty, literally, it might help to kind of pick it up and smell it. Yeah, that smells like wet dirt. As I was heading out to excavate this dirt in my backyard, my husband said, "Oh, are you just going to grab some potting soil?" Because we just like had a bag of potting soil nearby. And I said, "Oh, funnily enough, that is actually a distinct wine tasting term. Potting soil is different than just earth or wet earth, right? We don't tend to say dirt, right? Because no one really wants to buy a wine. If I was talking to you about it and I called it dirty, I don't think most people would want it. If I told you though that it was like digging around in your garden, you probably are more inclined to buy that. So now that you've kind of have that scent in your mind, the idea is to then smell the wine and see if you get any of that aroma there, and then also taste. And you can kind of then go back and forth. So I recommend smell the dirt, smell the wine, taste the wine, and kind of go back and forth between them, and let me know if you're kind of picking up on any similarities between those things. How's everybody doing out there? I think my little sneezing attack might not be the only one tonight. Particularly as I'm like smelling dirt. I don't know, but this was a good timing on my allergies part. If you're having trouble picking up on aroma in the wine, it can help to, it can definitely help to swirl. That helps create the centrifuge so that you can get a more concentrated bit of aroma. And it can also help to smell with your mouth slightly open. It helps your olfactory senses. Alexis is saying that she can taste it more than smell it, but as the wine is kind of opening up and becoming a little bit more expressive, she's smelling it more. And Doralee is saying that they are definitely picking up the dirt. When I tasted this wine, it's been a little while since I've tasted this wine. I just brought this into the shop just for class. I was so like, oh my God, of course that wine. That's like the perfect wine for this concept. I did actually write dirt. And again, I don't usually write that because when I'm taking my notes, I am trying to already process and think of what I would say to you all, or what am I going to put on a tag, what can be customer facing information. But sometimes something just like strikes me and I just like write it down because it's like, I got to get it out of my head. And I just wrote dirt. Like I was like, yeah, that wine is like for real. Alexis is saying that the color of the wine even reminds her a bit of an earthy color. Yeah, for sure. So the really fascinating thing about this wine, and I want to hear from more of you. I want to know if you are like, I don't get it. I'm not seeing any correlation between them. That's legitimate, and it's okay if you're not. I'd rather know than have you sit quietly. It's okay to tell me that you don't get it. And if you are not watching this live and you're watching the recording and you're like, yeah, no, I don't get it, please feel free to email me. I'm happy to kind of talk through these concepts even more. So don't feel like you just have to sit quietly. So back to this wine being particularly interesting. So this wine is a grape called Freesia, which is on the very bottom there. Freesia is the name of the grape. Freesia normally is it's a grape grown in Piedmont, and it's decently floral and it's pretty bright. It does have the tannins, like the same tannins that I assume you're all getting, that kind of drying of your mouth. it does have that, but it's a very kind of like pretty lighter wine. And they call it Cabernet Inverso because they wanted to kind of invert the norm with this. They wanted to do Frisia in a very different style than people are used to. So this is not, if you like this, this is not what you're going to get with other people's Frisia, which I think is just kind of fun. It's kind of cool because usually that's the kind of wine I don't pour in a class, because usually I want something that's like the standard bearer and very like, yes, and now you know something about Frisia. But for this class, it's fun because I can say like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's a typical wine or not. What matters is it kind of smells like dirt. Katya and Drew are saying that they're getting lots of old damp leather, so earthy but not necessarily actual soil, and I'm totally cool with that. I can totally see leather. I'm not saying that it's not there. For me, it's a little more on the palate than the nose. There's something that happens kind of in my mid palate after I've swallowed. So the mid palate being kind of like the middle of my mouth. There's something that's happening there that, again, I'm not telling you you have to eat dirt, but I'm just saying that if you were to eat a little bit of the dirt, that after taste that would be left in your mouth is kind of reminiscent of this. Alexis is going to do it. I feel like I should join you in solidarity, so I'm going to do it too. So here we go. You all do not have to do it. And considering I have a dog, I don't know that this is actually a remotely sanitary or good idea, but here I'm doing it anyway because I love you guys. That is what dirt tastes like. Yep, it's been a really long time since I've had dirt in my mouth. I was like one of those kids who liked to make mud pies and stuff. There it is. Yep. I'm going to say, for those of you who don't want to put dirt in your mouth, it's really pretty similar. Right? Well, that was an experience. Hilarious. I'm like, but it helped, right? It does help. I do think it helps. I mean, if you are up for it and you have quote unquote clean dirt, because I'm now really regretting my decision to do that because I am. But anyway, know that it's there. Know that you can do that at any time. So if nothing else, I think that even if you're not getting literal dirt, you are getting kind of the idea of an earthy quality, right? A non-fruit, non-herbal, non-spice quality about the wine. And that's really the earth bucket, like all of those things that aren't herbs, that aren't fruit, that aren't spice. What's left is kind of these qualities of earth. So that's like kind of our baseline level. Are there other people who aren't getting the earthy thing at all in this wine? Even just like the general kind of like vague notion of something that's savory, something that's not fruity. I'm going to take it from the radio silence that the answer is no, but I am here for you. Alexis says in her chat, honestly, putting it on my tongue really helped for anyone on the fence of trying. I agree. I think I did it with a little too much gusto. I like really took some dirt in my mouth, but I really do think that it helps. So for what that is worth. Nathan is saying that he keeps getting black cherry and Sarah is getting black licorice. I think those components are definitely there. I don't think that, I don't think in any of the 3 wines that we're going to see tonight that it's like a complete, only 100% earthy, a dirt, a mushroom, a smoke, right? Like there are definitely going to be other things going on in these wines. It's near impossible to get these qualities in very singular linear ways. I'm going to take a second and explain that. When we do component tasting and we do, let's say, grapefruit is the easiest one that comes to mind. Grapefruit is a flavor that is very prominent in New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc. And winemakers really go after that, and perhaps maybe even manipulate the wine to get it to really smell and taste like that. So it's very easy to get a wine that smells and tastes just like grapefruit, to the point where it's almost like grapefruit juice, where it's just like, yep, that's grapefruit. And there's not a whole lot else you want to say about it. With earthy elements, when you have these kinds of flavors and aromas, as I said, you're going to be dealing with certain grapes, but you're also going to be dealing with slightly cooler places. And inherently, that means they're not going to be like ripe fruit, like, here I am, I'm black cherry and I'm super obvious. They're going to be more nuanced. And so what I interpret as dirt, you might interpret as smoke. You might interpret as something else. I'm thinking ahead to our last wine that is Cabernet Franc. Cabernet Franc is known for being really herbal. There's no way that we can get around that fact. We just can't. That's what Cabernet Franc tastes like. So we're going to do, it's herbal, yes, true statement. And then also we're going to talk about the other thing, right? So if you are getting, black licorice, black cherry, smoke, leather, like that's all fair game. It totally is. So yeah, so don't feel like you're missing anything. Ellen Carlson says that she feels like this wine is missing something, but maybe that she's used to a more round, fruit forward wine. I would also say, like, first of all, that's totally fair if you feel that way about it. Secondly, a wine that has this much tannin up front could really benefit from some aeration, some decanting. And I'd be really curious to hear what you think of it in an hour or so. I think that it can, it might become a little bit more cohesive. So maybe let me know. Maybe it's not your thing right now, and maybe it'll be your thing in a little while. So let me know. Great. Questions before we move on? If nothing else, I'm hoping that that gives you kind of like a sense of, what people mean when they say a wine smells like wet earth. It's this. This is what it means. And it also is a really good time to say that it might not be super obvious to you. So you might read, I don't know, a winery's description of the wine, and they might talk about, they might use all these descriptors that you're like, I'm not getting any of that in the wine. And that is okay. If what you want to decide for yourself is, I like that or I don't like that wine, that can be where you stop. So you don't have to do it. Take it more seriously than that. Jen Savino's asking what I would pair this with. So any of the 3 of them, they pair really well with earthy things, not surprisingly. So any of them are going to pair really nicely with mushrooms. So just because we have mushrooms for our second wine doesn't mean that the other 2 wouldn't be equally good with mushrooms. And I think particularly this would be great with some mushroom risotto or a mushroom ragu of some sort. That amount of tannin, I know Jen, and I believe that Jen eats meat, I think. And it would be really good with some sort of grilled meat as well. I think it would really work nicely with that. Katja and Drew were saying that it's like a fireplace after the fire's gone out. Huh. I'm not picking up on the same smokiness that everybody else is, but that's okay. That's what makes the world go round. Jen says that she's a meat lover and mushrooms as well. So great. Maybe have some meat and mushrooms. In my mind, I went to like a restaurant meal and I was like, oh, it'd be so great with truffles. But I don't think most of us have truffles at home. So that's okay. All right, let's move on to the second wine. So for those of us drinking along with me, that is your Sancerre Rouge. I don't know how many of you know that there's delightful red wine in Sancerre as well as white wine. Or maybe you don't know what the hell Sancerre is, and that's okay too. If that's true, Sancerre is a sub-region within the Loire Valley, and it is primarily known for its Sauvignon Blanc, but it also makes some absolutely delicious Pinot Noir, which is what we have in our glass. So another thing that I learned in my smells book is that cooked things also, or I'm sorry, warm things smell more than cold things. So that's a really interesting tie-in with wine, because I always tell people, if we're drinking white wine in class, like pull the wines out of the refrigerator before class and let them warm up a little bit, because if you take them out of the fridge, they're just going to smell and taste like this one specific acid, which is true. That part is accurate. But I didn't know the part that's like, no, there's like the science of it, that the smell, the scent molecules don't travel through cold air as well. And they travel through warm objects better. So I bring that up to say that I have just a raw white mushroom. But if you do this and you're still kind of like, I'm not sure, I'm not quite getting the mushroom thing, it might help to saute them a little bit. Or perhaps you're having something with mushrooms on them tonight for dinner, and you can pause. I do think that my white mushroom is pretty odoriferous. I think that it has a whole lot of scents. So I do think that I'm getting it, that smell. Now, one thing I'm going to point out before we smell and taste the wine, it's a decently delicate smell. I think that probably most of you have had a white mushroom before in your life. And you'll know that it's also a pretty delicate flavor, right? It is not a super, super pungent flavor. So that can mean that it's not so obvious in the wine. But mushroom is definitely a thing that gets talked about, gets bandied about, and often gets bandied about with Pinot. So Ellen says that they have dried mushrooms, and when they opened the wine, they smelled exactly alike, so much that she made a face. That's amazing. That's amazing. I love it. I'm pretty happy with just smelling. Like, I'm pretty like, yep, those things smell very, very similar to me. I'm curious to see what you all think. Ellen says that her first taste was not good, but her second was better. And Alexa says that she gets this one more on the nose than on the taste. And I think that's great after one taste. I think that's totally fair. And again, that is part of component tasting, is pointing out that when wine professionals talk about wine, we are not just talking about the flavor, right? We are talking about the whole package, the whole experience. And often these elements are aromas less than flavors. So when I talk about something, if you saw a note from me that said wet leaves, right? Which was another one that I thought about. Our timing in Wisconsin, yes, some leaves are falling, but not all of them are falling. And I was like, I didn't really want to deal. I didn't want to deal with it, whether or not we had enough, wet leaves on the ground. So anyway, but if I said wet leaves, that's more often than not, for me, it's an aroma. So again, if somebody's selling you a bottle of wine somewhere and they're using these terms and they're saying like there's mushroom or truffle or anything like that, it may or may not be the flavor. So just heads up. I'm seeing some of you weighing in that you also agree that it's more a smell and less a flavor. Something slightly smoky. I read an article today in Wine Enthusiast magazine that was just kind of like about this information. And they said the best way to think about earthy is to think about dirt and rocks, right? Like those are the things. And one thing about this wine that comes through is I think the rocks as well, right? And I said we weren't going to talk about minerality too much tonight, but there's no denying it. And so that rockiness also translates to flint, translates to smoke very easily. Those are like really quick little through lines. So I'm not surprised that some of you are getting that. Ellen says she's tasting anise, which is really interesting because Nathan was saying that he tasted one of them, either he or Sarah tasted black licorice on the last wine. So that's an interesting thing that seems to like be coming up in these wines, this black licorice thing. Which also feels really closely related to all this stuff. It technically isn't part of this group, but it feels pretty close. I don't want to necessarily put my opinion out there, but I have to say that Alexis mentioned that she loves this wine, mushroom or not. And I'm going to agree. If you don't love this wine, I still love you. It's okay. We don't have to have the same exact taste in wine, but I personally very much enjoy this wine. I think it is delicious. Other people, how are other people feeling on the mushroom tip / just kind of like general impressions of the wine? Curious what you're all thinking. I was very cautious when I was buying my mushrooms because, it's like they smell different. They taste different, right? Like I was trying to think of, do I really want a portobello? I almost bought shiitakes. I almost bought oyster mushrooms. And I was like, I don't think oyster mushrooms, like, they're not like, they don't smell the way that I think of this wine as smelling, right? Katja and Drew are saying that they love the bright, fresh cranberry flavors. They're finding it more fruity than mushroomy. Do you find any earthy element to it at all, or are you just getting fruit? Because again, I'm not saying that there isn't fruit in these wines. It's wine, I definitely still getting earth. Okay, great. That's all that I'm. I would say really just kind of focusing on the smell. I think the similarity in smells is pretty intense. Personally. It's so hard when I'm drinking water in the middle of tasting because I feel the need to aerate my water, which is not necessary. Getting a tartness at the end for sure. Absolutely. Pinot Noir always has high acidity. And when it's from a colder place like this, you're definitely going to get more tart fruit than ripe fruit. So for sure, that makes complete sense. Katja is definitely smelling the mushroominess. Great. Wonderful. And it's okay if you're not. I just, I don't want it to be just me. I don't want to be all alone in my mushroom land. Yeah. All right. Questions? Thoughts, concerns? No? I think I think mushrooms are probably the harder one to get. So the fact that so many of you are right there with me is great. And so if you're not there with me, that's okay too. And I do think that it would, I'm going to do it later too. I'm going to cook some mushrooms and kind of see if there's more, is it the same amount of similarity? Is it a bigger contrast? Is it more similar? I'm just kind of curious to see kind of like what that changes and how it affects it. Okay. Yeah. So the last wine is the Chateau Fouquet from Domaine Filiatreau, which is also in the Loire Valley. This is Cabernet Franc. I said it before, but I'm going to say it again, that I don't expect you all to only get smoke. There are arguably smokier wines that I could have picked. And there are various reasons why I didn't. So I'm not going to say that this is like the utmost smokiest wine I've ever had in my whole life. I have tasted some wines more recently than not that are like mezcal. They are so smoky that I kind of don't understand why people would want to drink them. Some of you have taken other classes with me that we've talked about Oregon and Northern California and the wildfires and the effect that wildfires are having on those wines. And so we have actually kind of talked about smoke a little bit already in 2021 classes. But for tonight's purposes, whether you've ever seen my face before or not, we're going to talk about smoke in this context. So this smokiness is not coming from actual smoke. This is not a smoke taint wine. This is coming from the Cabernet Franc and the soil in the Loire Valley. So the best way to do this is to light a match. If you have one, blow it out and then smell. And that's kind of the scent that you're going for. Slash, if you have a fireplace and you happen to be near it, or the fire pit, and you can do that, that's also super good, because the one thing with matches is you are going to get a little sulfur. So it can be a little tricky, but this is the best way that I have found to kind of accomplish what we're trying to get to here. So I'm just going to let it burn just a little bit. That's a weak match. It just went out. Okay. I do love that smell. Yeah. I'm there. I'm in the campfire. I'm definitely like, I'm feeling the campfireness. Mm-hmm. How's everybody else doing? How are you all feeling? I taste a little burnt marshmallow. I love it. Love, love, love it. Nathan says that he wishes he was sitting around a campfire. Like, totally, right? I feel that deep in my bones. I feel like that's wine. Summer and Amy regret not getting the third bottle. Well, here's what I can say. This wine, of the three wines, The Chateau Fouquet is something that we do always carry. So you can get it some other time and totally come back and do this. You know, it's totally open. You can do it anytime you like. So don't regret it too much. Alexa says she gets it. It isn't as smoky as when we had another class that tasted like mezcal, but you like it. And Ellen is making a distinction between smoky and burnt. And that's an interesting distinction. I think there's for me, again, this part is subjective, right? This is subjective. There is a roasted pepper aroma that I'm getting on this wine, right? Like a charred pepper skin kind of thing, that could possibly be leading to where you are, right? To that char, right? I think that is totally fair. I think that is. Doug says cabin fireplace. Yeah, I agree. There's somebody earlier said something about like woodsy smoke. I think somebody said it earlier for one of the other wines. And I was like, oh, but like in my mind, I was like, but this wine is like my woodsy smoky wine. And again, not like in an overpowering kind of way. I think some of you are hitting on that. Wines from the Canary Islands are really smoky, and they're just too hard to come by. And that is why we don't have them tonight. They are the kinds of wines that come to the shop, maybe once a year. They're not something that I necessarily can buy in quantity enough to have for class. So in case you want to explore it more, there are, again, more like over the top versions. And Katya and Drew are saying, yes, this is even more smoky fireplace than the Italian wine, definitely smoky. So that's great, right? Because I think a lot of you were on the smoke train for the first wine, and I am more than happy to have you stay there. But perhaps why I was a little hesitant was I kind of knew where we were headed, right? And so perhaps I was like, no, not yet. or like, it's not the most obvious example of it, right? But I am glad that I'm glad that you're all picking up on it in this wine. I was worried that this wine had too many other things going on, but I'm glad to see that it feels like y'all are able to put those other things to the side and focus on the smoke. So that's really super cool. That's great to see. And smoke is one of those things I'll mention that when I think, when it's super obvious in a wine, I feel like I owe it to my customer to tell them, because I do think that it is something that is decently polarizing, whether people want a smoky thing or not. But I also know that because it's polarizing, if I even mention it, there's going to be like a bucket of people out there. Bucket apparently is my word tonight. There aren't buckets of people. There's going to be a group of people out there that automatically rule themselves out and don't want the wine because there's any hint of smoke. And I would actually put myself in, I think I would have put myself in that category, I should say. I don't really go for smoky things that often. I'm not mezcal. I'm not a peated Scotch person. That flavor profile does not do it for me. And I know that personally, would I want a wine that said smoky? And then I'm like, but it's there, right? It's one of the things that makes this wine interesting. It's not the only note in the wine, but it's kind of this I don't know, background note. The last thing I'll mention about Revelations in Air, the Jude Stewart book, is people who are professional smellers for perfume companies and stuff. They have different terminology, right? Every career has them, and they call it a heart note. And that's kind of like the smell that kind of, I don't know, is to me, I think of it as like the bass note, like the thing that's kind of like running in the background, kind of like carrying it all through. And so for me, I kind of think of that here with this wine. It maybe isn't like the most obvious thing. It's not like the punch in the face, but it's like, yep, it's just like kind of there. Nathan's saying that they definitely smell and taste a through line with all three of the wines. That's so cool. I think that that's, more than anything, that's the intention of this class, is that you can, whether you say, oh yeah, totally 100%, I get mushroom and I get smoke and I get wet earth. It's more like, do you see the similarities here with wines that would be described as earthy? And does that make sense as a descriptor now? And is it something now, so, okay, think about that. Does it make sense? Can you conceptualize of earthiness, right? And I'm seeing that Katya and Drew and Katya's parents all agree with you, and that's really cool. I'm super, super glad. So I think that like figuring out, okay, yep, I get it. I get that these are all in that category of earthy, right? And then you get to decide for yourselves individually, and I mean yourself, not you and your partner. You get to decide for yourself whether you like that or not, whether that's something you enjoy. I say that because I say the thing about the partner part because single people feel empowered to like what they like, right? Because damn it, do it. I think people who are in a couple, they often try to, like, I don't know, I see it again and again and again in wine class where people feel like they're supposed to have the same taste buds or the same ability to smell. And like, we're not the same people. So even if you've been married for, 50 years, you might not be picking up on the mushroom. That's okay. So it's my little speech about smell what you smell, right? Taste what you taste. Is there anyone out there? Oh, thank you, Jen Savino's telling me I'm so wise. It's so funny though. I remember the moment in class where I had a younger couple. I would say they were probably in their mid-20s. And it really was like it had never occurred to them that like, but why aren't I picking up on the chocolate that you're talking about? And I was like, well, because you don't have the same taste buds. And they looked at me like I was absolutely bonkers. And I was like, is that not apparent to you all? Right? Like that seems pretty apparent to me. Is there anyone out there tonight who's not seeing that through line, who's not picking up on just the general concept of earthiness? That to me would be more of a, let's slow down and think about that more. Let's talk about that more. So if you are one of those people, whether you are joining us live or you are watching the recording at any point in the future, reach out to me. If you're not seeing a commonality in these things, let's talk a little bit more. We can point out other wines, do a compare and contrast, right? Pour the Sancerre with a really super fruity Pinot Noir, and then maybe perhaps the earthy thing will make more sense. So let me know. Katja and Drew are saying that they're also enjoying the flavor aspects of the last wine. For reals, right? I mean, the last wine, I just think I love them all. I really do. It's fun. It's fun to teach a concept like this that is a little nerdy and requires us to think a bit. But also these are my flavors. These are my aromas. I want, particularly right now at the end of September, I waited to teach this class. I've been thinking about this class for months, but I was like, that's not the vibe everybody's feeling in July. People want this now, right? And then before we wrap up, because we just have a few minutes, I am going to revisit the first wine and see if it's changed at all. Now, granted, I didn't decant it or aerate it at all, but I'm just kind of curious how it's doing a little bit later. Alexis is asking if the aroma kits that you can buy are worth purchasing. Yeah, I would say yes, they are. I was actually talking with the owners of A Room of One's Own bookstore, which is set to open down the street from my shop very soon, and that's super exciting. And we were talking about, there's a wine book, apparently like a scratch and sniff wine book, which is kind of the same idea as the aroma kit. And it's the same concept as this, right? It's the same idea of smelling a scent and then tasting a wine that kind of goes with it. So I think they're great. I shouldn't say I think they're great. I think they're good. I think that they're helpful. I am always more inclined to go with the actual item. I just think that, I don't know, it's a little bit more genuine, I guess, but those aroma kits can help because they can get you things that you might not be able to get yourself. Right? Summer is saying that yes, the first wine has opened up. We did the matches and tried the first one again, and we still had it in the glass, and it changed. We also like it better than before. That's awesome. I definitely think there's more fruit to it now, right? I think the fruit and the acidity are coming out more. So, Ellen Carlson, who didn't think the wine had much going on, let me know what you think, because I do think that it has a lot going on now. So that's cool. That's super cool to see. Tastes the same to me. Okay, well, great. You know what? You have two other great wines that you can drink, so it's okay. It's okay if it's not your bag. Are there other lingering questions or thoughts about these? Do you feel like you know now where you come down on earth and how to find the wines that are going to kind of hit those notes? Obviously, with my trio, the Loire Valley is a safe bet. But cool places, generally speaking. The Willamette Valley in Oregon, though it's getting a little bit warmer, but more of that. Parts of the Rhone Valley in France, Piedmont, as we're seeing, right, has that earthy thing. So there are places. I'm just reading the comments. Dorley says it's been very helpful, and I could have my own show. I love that idea. Somebody recently, a person who's not in class with us this evening, she contacted me last week, and she told me that she thinks this webinar format, she said, I think it's your medium. And I was like, I feel so weirdly at home. Like I just, I'm glad. Thank you. Summer says that we love learning from you. Thank you. I love teaching. I really do. I adore it. Yeah, it's so great. And it's been almost a year since I've taught one of these component tasting classes. I can't believe that. It was last October that we did apples. So thank you. I'm just super glad that y'all were here. I think this is great. Oh, thank you. You're all just laying on the compliments. Thanks, everybody. You're so nice. Thank you. I like that Alexis did a ranking of, for the component being present, 3, 2, 1, but for her liking the wines, 2, 1, 3, which I just think is like really amazing. Those are not the same thing, right? I can smell and taste the thing that I'm, being told I'm supposed to smell and taste. But does that mean I like the wine? Not necessarily. So I think that's a really great way of thinking about it. Jen Savino is asking if we're going to carry these wines for a while. So the Fouquet is something that as long as the distributor has it in stock, I usually do have this on the shelf. So this one for sure. The Sancerre, tasting it again, like gosh darn it, is it delicious. It's a little above our normal price point. So I will probably carry it around for a while. I mean, this is the time of year where I think people are really interested in drinking great Pinot. So yes, the Cantine Valpene, on the other hand, I don't know that there's much more of this left. So I can't say 100% how long this one will be around. I bought enough to cover tonight's class and a little bit more. So there are a few bottles floating around the shop right now, but it's something that if it's around, you want me to hold it for you? Absolutely. Rightio, Jen. I will. We'll hold it for you. Okay, great. I'm so glad. Okay, it is time to say goodnight. Thank you all for joining me. We have classes coming up in October. We're doing the Republic of Georgia, which I am so excited about. It's going to be my first time talking about that. I had a chance to go to a seminar earlier in the year and learn a lot about Georgian wine. For those of you who are in the wine club at Table Wine, we did Georgian wines a little bit ago. I'm not going to repeat those wines. So they will be a whole new trio of really wonderful Georgian wines. And then later in October, we're doing one of our grape classes and we're doing Carignan. I know it's a little less major of a grape than, let's say, Cabernet or Pinot. And I think that's why we need to tackle it. I've never done it before. I adore Carignan. If you liked the Cab Franc from tonight, Carignan is kind of in that wheelhouse. So join me for that. It's a nice hearty red for late October weather. So that's great. Oh, and Katya's parents, this was their first time joining and they really enjoyed it. So thank you. Thank you to all of you. It was my pleasure as always. I will talk to y'all soon. Good night.